everybody to, whoa, there we go, to be able to learn more from one another.
I
So
certainly have. I
yeah,
certainly have
we've
learned a
learned a
lot.
lot together, right?
Yeah,
I don't think a month's gone by and we're like, wow, that was really good, and we keep learning. And I think that's part of our it's our mission as human beings to learn from one another so that we can do better and be better. So tonight we're celebrating Black history. And I'd like to begin that with acknowledging that Black history is American history, and understanding past barriers to progress for marginalized individuals, specifically people of color, helps us better recognize systems that still produce discriminatory practices and disparate outcomes. Knowing Black history not only helps us recognize these systems, but it also makes clear that these systems affect more than just the marginalized. Systems of racism and oppression hurt all of us. So the theme for the 2022 Black History Month is Black health and wellness. So the focal point resonates for many of us, given the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the racial disparities in healthcare that were illuminated as people were trying to get care for COVID and other maladies. So I'd like to start with this. So Julian, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Willa, as well.
you're welcome.
Yeah. So compared to white counterparts, African Americans are generally at a higher risk for heart disease, stroke, cancer, asthma, influenza, pneumonia, diabetes, HIV, I mean, you name it. According to the Office of Minority Health, part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So while the spotlight right now may be on disadvantaged African Americans while fighting COVID, and throughout the healthcare system while combating all these other diseases, the CDC reported that the death rate decreased 25% from 1999 to 2015, and that African Americans aged 18 to 49 are actually 2 times as likely to die from heart disease than whites. Also, African Americans aged 35 to 64 are 50% more likely to have high blood pressure than whites. So I know not that long ago, you and I had the opportunity to meet with our phenomenal president, Caroline Sayin. And I know she's here tonight, so she did not pay me to say that. But Summit Healthcare's believes in the importance of empowering community through healthcare, education, supplies, the elements of day-to-day life that are missing, but necessary to live a healthier life. What are some of the strategies and programs offered by Summit Healthcare's?
Yeah, so we are, first, our mission is that we're focused on helping those that are in need, and our neighbors living in underserved communities gain access to medical, educational, social services for them to live a healthier life. So what has always been important for us is to meet our neighbors in need exactly where they are. You know, our team, we have a community outreach team, which is we have a mobile medical wellness vehicle, and we're boots on the ground, you know, amid COVID, boots on the ground, providing access to these chronic disease screenings, the A1C screenings, hypertension, looking at their BMI, and enrolling them in our signature Food, Health, and Hope program. It's in a partnership with the Community Food Bank of New Jersey, where we provide the free screenings and also provide health education. Also, the food bank provides the diabetic friendly food boxes and also provides that nutrition education. So although that's our signature program, chronic disease. We also did vaccinations, working with our community partners on vaccinations. We ourselves, our staff did testing, just providing that access to these screenings were crucial, especially during COVID.
Thank you. Young African Americans are actually living with diseases more common at older ages. Do you guys, or is there a plan overall, how to reach this generation?
Yeah, historically, we have our Educating Future Leaders program, which is pretty much our third pillar, which is providing access and education for those pursuing a degree in health and those that are interested in pursuing a degree in health. Which I'm excited about. Within the next several months, we're going to be partnering with a school in Newark, New Jersey, to really provide that preventative care. Because one of the things that we saw is that, we're boots on the ground in our underserved communities, screening our Black and Brown neighbors in need. And we said, well, why can't we prevent this? And so we're going to be partnering with a school in Newark, and we're going to be providing that level of education. Now, what we know is that in underserved communities, it's either a bodega, a liquor store, or a church, or fast food. You don't have access to nutritious foods. So our youth don't have that access. So for part of what our strategic plan is to really provide a level of education as they are younger.
I'd like to throw something else into that conversation, if I may, in and around the barriers that are created through that. And so I'm gonna swing over to Jonathan for a minute here. And what do you see in the work that you do? Julian is doing all this work in the communities, but there is this barrier in the African American community around healthcare, wellness, mental care. What do you see those barriers being, Jonathan?
So certainly history is the best teacher and prepares us to understand what we're struggling with. I think it is the remnants of our history. It's also internalized racial inferiority, in terms of what we struggle with collectively, which is the result of a systemic racism. People of color don't want to go to hospitals. They don't want to seek that kind of support and help. Never mind the barriers to it, right? The challenges around trusting healthcare providers and practitioners is real. And it's real because it's steeped in a historical reality that goes beyond Tuskegee and J. Marion Sims and some of the prominent, well-known sort of instances of medical abuse against Black bodies. Many of us are born understanding that you can't trust these systems because they will hurt you. And it's hard to break that down. I mean, if you've lived your life conditioned to think one thing, conditioned to know that you're not valued, it's very hard to trust systems that, and on the other hand, tell you that we're going to take care of you when you know that your body, your soul, and your spirit is devalued.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that even today, I just had a health situation, and there were limited resources of physicians that look like me, that could relate to me, and that I have to put my trust in people who don't know my cultural makeup.
Well, you're speaking. We are in church right now.
We're going to church.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
We're in church right now. So yes, and I think that to piggyback off what you're saying, that a lot of our neighbors in need, they don't see a physician that looks like them in their image or even speak their language. And the cultural competencies is a huge issue. It's a huge dynamic that the trust factor of them wanting to go and see a physician, but they are not comfortable and they're not confident that they're going to receive that care, the level of care that their other counterparts would not, that do receive that.
Mm-hmm. And how do you advocate for yourself? Where does the learning come from in the ability to advocate when you think about and I'm going to throw this question in there for the both of you. You know, in the American psychiatric, there's only 2% of the psychiatrists are Black,
Wow.
right? So,
Willa,
and
can you
there's a high
repeat that
cost
number
around
again?
mental health. There's a shame around mental health, and all of the things that create, to your point, Julian, the chronic problems is also aligned with mental health, right? The things that people are dealing with, and even in the workplace, has to do with their mental health. So Jonathan, is there, in your mind, some way of how to move into the direction of getting people aligned? And then I'll go back over to Julian about that.
So I think it's a nuanced issue, right? It's very difficult to, when you don't see yourself represented, right? When you don't see yourself represented in these professions, it's very hard to believe that it's something that someone like you can do. And I think it's interesting because, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker by trade, and there's a nuanced dynamic to it that I think is also the result of internalized racial inferiority. Years ago, I was working in a clinic in Brooklyn, and had the chance to work with a really phenomenal Black psychiatrist. And we were working in a pretty eclectic community in Northern Brooklyn. And I remember sitting in his office, we were having a discussion about the work. And he talked to me about his struggles with engaging clients of color, which kind of blew me away, because I'm like, okay, well, you're a Black psychiatrist and you would think clients of color would want to come to you. But what he said is the challenge was getting clients of color to see him as a real doctor, because they had never seen Black psychiatrists. So in their mind, the picture of a psychiatrist is a little white guy in a white coat with white hair, right? Now here you have this man of color who's telling you he's a doctor. I don't trust that, because it isn't real. So that's the other side of what we've been conditioned to think and believe about the profession. And that, and again, ties into what Julian said, the whole other piece of how do you speak up to authority if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with a doctor, and the idea is that this is a collaborative process, not someone dictating to you what you should or shouldn't be doing. But healthcare is a collaboration where you should be able to make informed decisions about what you receive and what you don't. And the idea that you can't speak up in the face of that. So if I go see the doctor, I'm not going to say anything, because I've been conditioned to think that I can't talk back to the boss, the teacher, the authority figure, which is also part of that dynamic that many of us as people of color struggle with. So we don't go, we don't want to deal with them, we don't trust the systems. And then when we do go, we don't speak up, which in some respects is just as bad as not going, because this is our lives and this is our care.
Yeah, and to piggyback off what Jonathan said, in the Black and brown community, you're taught to keep your problems in your home. You don't speak about what's going on in your home. So, I think we need to normalize seeking counseling, seeking help. Also encouraging more Black and brown people to go into this profession. So again, more Black and brown people feel comfortable to seek that help. I was reading a study that said roughly, I think it was 20 to 40% of African, Black and brown people are less likely to go to counseling. And then there's another 30 to 50% that will actually stay in counseling. Wow. The national study, I was reading that, and what we know is that prior to COVID, mental health was a challenge in our communities. And now during COVID, it's exacerbated. You're dealing with, how do you function with going to work, juggle a full-time job, knowing that you're an hourly employee? How do you gain access to medical services? Your local clinic may be closed. How do you get your child to school? How do you get access to food? How do you get access to diapers? All these things that you're grappling with, and that within your community that you have to go to work. So I think that, especially now during COVID, it's important that we normalize everyone getting seeking mental assistance. There's 211, just talk to your local pastor, talk to your clergy, talk to a family member, but normalizing to just speak up and talk about what's going on inside of you.
And I just would want to add one thing to what Julian said, because I think that is a beautiful point. The other thing is to recognize what the resistance is. So there's this oversimplification of this notion that, non-compliant, don't want to follow healthcare, not really caring about the body and the mind and the spirit. But there are pieces of it, again, that are tied to the history and tied to what people of color struggle with. And I think part of the work is to have patience and recognize what's coming up in the moments as we support people to work through those issues. So, it's a multi-pronged solution to a nuanced, multi-pronged problem. You want more people of color who occupy these professional positions so that we can see people like ourselves doing the work. But you also want to meet people where they're at in their own fears and struggles with this work, and understand that there are historical precedents that support the feelings, and that you've got to work with people through that resistance and not just dismiss it as, people being ignorant, not wanting to do the work and not being non-compliant, which is something that's pretty prevalent in our profession.
Right. Julian, you touched on, you got to go to work, you got to show up no matter what's going on. And I wanted to draw attention to the fact that research has shown that the onset of a chronic disease reduces our wages by as much as 18%. And chronic illness may restrict employment and increase medical expenses, obviously, costly caregiving responsibilities, which all contribute to the gap that we see between the haves and the have-nots. And we saw that recently Summit Healthcares is planning a half a dozen health and wellness fairs over the next 6 months. Can you share a little bit more about what those events look like, and what's the purpose behind them, what's the target, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. And so when I joined Summit Healthcare's January 2021, and one of the things that I quickly identified as being a barrier, not a barrier, but that could enhance our work, would be adding these health and wellness fairs. So what we know is that during COVID, these social service offices were closed. You had your local WIC office, you had, your SNAP, your food stamp office. If you were applying for TANF, there was a challenge going back and forth, because again, people in the TANF and the WIC offices, they were sick as well. So one of the things that I said is, why don't we have our mobile medical wellness vehicle, we're boots on the ground, equipped with our RN, our physicians from Summit Health, and also a medical assistant screening. Why not partner and invite the local community health center, the FQHC, also invite our SNAP education, nutrition education, food stamps, the local, the gym, any additional free resources. We were working with the counties to provide access to the vaccine. We were doing testing. So every addition, any resource. I'm proud that, on April 23rd, we're going to be hosting our biggest health fair in collaboration with the city of Plainfield, where, it's my home, my city. I live in Plainfield, but I want to make sure that my neighbors in need, while they missed the health and wellness, or they didn't get access to, the simplest thing is registering your dog, or getting access to a flu shot, getting access to the free services from the Parks and Recreation. There was a lot of services that weren't provided, but the offices were also closed. So for me, it's always been important to meet our neighbors in need where they are, provide those resources in real time. They're coming to the food pantry to get the food and get screened. Why not layer that out with 5 or 6 other different tents so that it removes that barrier to providing or accessing that care?
I love that.
So we have about 6 to 8 health fairs coming up. We're going to be doing a lot of screening. So if you follow us on our social media, come on out. And if you know someone that lives in that community, tell them to come and receive these free services.
I have a brother that lives in Plainfield.
Oh,
So I will definitely connect you two together.
please.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. All of these different components, the outreach, the conversations, the pastors, all of these things that we're dealing with people are bringing into their workplace. They're carrying that on their shoulders. The burdens that you mentioned, Julian, but then there's the things I think that you mentioned, Jonathan, about the internalized racial inferiority systems that are in the workplace that couple with that. So here I am dealing with, I have migraines, I've got high blood pressure, I've got stress. My mental capabilities, what are they going to say about me today? All of those things. So when you're dealing with in the family services arena, Jonathan, you know, these things, and I'm going to tie back to what Kim had said about the cost in the workplace. What's a solution? What's an answer to that? You know, I hear a lot of pastors now are talking about mental health and going to therapists and that it's okay. You know, normally you don't talk about your business or you go tell your problems to a pastor, and that's opening up. But what else is there? That's a
So-
loaded question, I know.
Thanks, Willa.
So I think it's a reality. For me, it always goes back to honoring the root causes. I think, if you are a Black or brown person in any professional setting, there is your professional self, and then there's yourself outside of work. And I think it's undeniably true. I always cite this example. I can remember as a kid, my grandma, who, North Carolina, born and raised, she would always have her telephone voice and then her voice for us, so the telephone voice would be, the appropriate white voice, right? We talk white. And then, she'd have the Southern drawl when she would, be talking to us. But I remember, when I got old enough to start working, one of the things that the messages that I got from my mom and from my grandma was, when you get on that job, you need to act right. And in some respects, I understood it to be a protective, message, but essentially what she was saying is don't act Black. You need to comport yourself the way Black people, and Black men in particular, right, for me, need to comport themselves in the professional environment, which means you need to be small, you need to be non-aggressive, you need to be non-threatening, and you need to make sure that you're consistently doing that. So I say that to say that with all of the things that people and many people of color are working front-facing jobs, the direct service professionals and, essential workers, the fact that they don't feel essential because they're the ones that are out there doing the front-facing work, and the reality of the burdens of dealing, with your professional self as a person of color and not being able to consistently acknowledge it is challenging. So we talk about trauma, we talk about the vicarious trauma of working with clients and doing the work. We talk about all of the things that you have to deal with in your personal life in terms of, physical and medical conditions. But when are we talking about race? When are we talking about racial trauma? When is that, where is a place to process what I'm feeling when I walk into an environment that I may have been working in for 15 to 20 years, and I can be challenged about whether or not I need to be in that environment just by virtue of the fact that I'm a person of color. And I think microaggressions are things that we're beginning to have more conversations about, but those things are like the cuts that cause 1,000 wounds that we don't talk about and that we don't process consistently. So there's no way to address those things. We deal with the sort of benign, and benign isn't a great term to use for it, but the universal traumatic issues that we all struggle with. I think being able to know the nuanced difference between what people of color are struggling with and non-people of color are struggling, don't have to necessarily reconcile with, is important. I think it begins there. Acknowledge the fact that, there are microaggressions and there are things that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis to keep myself safe and protected, or to keep myself small and non-threatening, that wears on me not only psychologically, emotionally, and physically.
One of the things that this pandemic has done is really helped me create a support circle And one of the things I said is, mid-pandemic, I had a parent, my son, he has a lot of friends, and, one of the parents that went to the school, she had to work her 9 to 5 hourly job. She lives on the same street as me. So one of the things that I did is said, listen, bring your child over. I'm here. We're big dining room table. We could all just do homework all together. I'm here. So one of the things I did is I created that circle of check on your strong friends. Check on your weak. Just if you don't think you got a weak or strong friend, create a circle of friendship. And, that circle, started off with Fridays at the end of the week. We all kind of got together in the backyard and we had a glass of wine and celebrated that we made it through the week. But it's also just checking in with, hey, how's work going? How can I help you? And mid-pandemic, I found myself in the situation of them turning to, well, how can I help you? Because you're helping us. So I think it's important that, if you can't go and if you don't trust, to go see a physician, create a sister circle, create some type of support group. Listen, I have a ED support group, executive director support group, where I bounce ideas off of them. Listen, it's lonely at the top. And sometimes it's lonely when you are Black and brown as an executive director. So those are the challenges that, within my sister circle ED group, that we talk about the challenges on, the microaggressions. How do we conduct ourselves? And, and that's, I tell people, listen, if you can't see counseling, can't afford counseling, don't trust counseling, find a friend, find a group, just talk it out.
I think both of you touched on something that we've talked a lot about over the last couple of weeks with the women that we serve. And that's if you don't feel that you have a group or a circle and you feel like you're not feeling a certain kind of way, you tend to isolate yourself. And in doing so, you tend to get a lot more depressed and you feel like you're broken. There's something wrong with you. You can't let the people at work know what's wrong because that's going to be some kind of other defect or some other kind of barrier that you have to face. And your friends like you, Jillian, where you're saying, they finally came to you and said, how can we help you? Because you're helping us. Some people don't have that. And so how do we avoid that depression and that isolation and like Jonathan was saying, the microaggressions? How do you, if you don't feel like you have a friend in the world and you don't want anybody to know what you're feeling, how do we as individuals and even as Dress for Success as an organization, like how do we put that on the forefront in a way that it's safe and inviting and embracing? Like I don't know how to do that, and because I know that there's a whole lot of people out there feeling that way.
Yeah,
it is. I'm going to piggyback on Kim's statement for a minute, Julie and Jonathan, before you answer. It's like herding cats. It's trying to, that they're hurting. You're calling on them, you're emailing them, you're texting them, trying to get them to let them know that they're not by themselves. And we're not we're not hitting it. And different offers and different things to get them. How do you move somebody forward? Like I said, it's like herding cats.
So there's a book by an author named Susan Scott called Fierce Conversations. I don't know if any of you've heard of it. But essentially what she says is that the conversation is the relationship. And I think, there's a clear distinction between safety and brave spaces, right? So we need to have more brave spaces where people can have authentic conversations, so it's the sort of, I'm not crazy, am I syndrome, right? This idea that if I experience a microaggression, it's only me, or is it just me? When you create spaces where you can talk it through with people who have experienced the same things, and it's not just you, then it helps to have that support. And then the other piece about the fierce conversations is that, you know, undoing racism and anti-racist work isn't something that we do for people of color. It is something that we do for all of ourselves, because all of our humanities are tied up in it. So, you know, the idea that we all have a stake or a horse in this race is critical. And fierce conversations are not necessarily comfortable. They're safe, right? No one, you know, for the most part, is going to pull out a weapon. Someone, you know, we usually comport ourselves in professional circles respectfully, right? It is the fear of addressing issues that have to do with race. So it is the issue that's always in the room, whether we talk about it or not, and that comes up in one shape, form, or fashion. But the fear of talking about it openly and authentically creates such anxiety in people that it's often avoided. I mean, you have organizations, even in the wake of George Floyd, who still have a hard time saying anti-racist work, right? We've all embraced DEIB, and it's a beautiful, inclusive, and thoughtful, you know, frame of reference. But at its root, it's addressing structural issues of racism and anti-racist work. And I think it's important to be able to name it and claim it and be able to have these kind of conversations, because I do believe, like Susan Scott says, the conversation is the relationship. So just a plug for her book, but it's critical that we have these authentic, open, fierce conversations and create brave spaces.
Now I need to read another book. Willa has since I've known her, given me a list of books to read, and I am so blessed to have her open my mind in my world to reading things and understanding things in a different way. And the whole fact of how we got to Allies for Change was because Willa was willing to have a very candid conversation with me about George Floyd. And there was a day, I tell this often, there was a day I was like, you know, Willa, you know, I texted her something and she's like, I'm fine. And I knew if Willa says I'm fine, and that wasn't what I asked, she's not fine. And that was what made me realize, as upset and frustrated and angry as I was with what happened to George Floyd, I was able to turn the news off and go back to my life. And at that moment, Willa helped me go on a journey to understand white privilege. And while I grew up in a community where whites were not a majority, where I wasn't wealthy, where I didn't have a lot, I was, you know, whatever. I thought, you know, I have no privilege. I've worked my butt off to get where I am. Willa helped me in that journey, but it was a safe space where we were able to discuss it candidly. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of, what the heck are you talking about? There was a lot of back and forth, and I'm sure Willa can build on that. But the two of us made that commitment to one another to go through that journey. I don't know how many people have the opportunity to learn in that raw fashion and be open to it. And I still mess up. Willa's never shy about telling me when I mess up, and you know, and then she'll school me on that. But we have that dialogue where we're able to discuss it regularly. I think especially in communities where there are not a lot of white people mixed in, where there are not a lot of other groups mixed in, those discussions don't happen naturally. And I don't know how to fix that, you know, and as an individual or as an organization, like, how do we fix that when they're not used to talking to people and being as open and way candid like Willa is?
Well, I think and thank you for that. I'll send you my $1 later on that, Kim. But I think we need a lot more truth tellers. And that goes even in the Black and Brown community, that we have to speak our truths. And we have to be more open and sharing for those who have the intent and willingness and wanting to learn. See, if you come to me and you want to learn, then we will have that frank conversation. And I still love you afterwards, right? Because it's how do you learn? I go on my own journey. I've been a diversity practitioner since 1990. Now, but in any case, since 94, I've been doing this work. I have open mouth, insert foot, whether it's about Blacks, it's about gays, it's about women, it's about the military, you name it, I've learned it. And I think what has to happen, even in the Black and brown community, whether we're doing career fairs or we're having fierce conversations, we got to do them. We've got to start having those conversations and stop having those family secrets about, well, you know, cousin Johnny, he's always been like that, or she's got that temperament, or yeah, you need to go get your mammogram done. Yeah, you need to go have your blood pressure checked. Yeah, you got to pull away from the table and leave cousin Laura's, you know, pound cake alone. Okay, we got to start having fierce, I'm going to add another word to it, frank conversations, and be honest, and some of it is tough love, you know, but we've been so traumatized that our health is impacted behind it. I'm sitting here, my blood pressure went to the roof the other day when I saw a young Black man getting handcuffed in the Bridgewater Mall, while his white counterpart is being sat down and this young Black man is being handcuffed. My blood pressure went up again. I'm like, when is it going to stop?
Well, I think that I'm sorry. Well, I think we need to make, as a society, we need to make the uncomfortable conversation very comfortable. You know, I chair on a national nonprofit board. I chair the DEI work, and you know, our board, we're committed to making sure that our DEI work is entrenched even to the governance, how we even identify potential new board members, entrenched into the work of the organization. But even deeper than that, we're committed to making sure that whatever we learn at each board meeting, that we bring it back to our homes, we bring it back to our communities, because we have to make that uncomfortable conversation very comfortable. When I saw that video, I don't have high blood pressure, but I got a headache and I was enraged. But I think that once we have these dialogues like we're having tonight, this is the start. This is the start, that you have that conversation and not fear the, you know, what are they going to think? No, you know, I've put myself in front of this board, in front of many people, say, ask me the questions that you have to get you uncomfortable. And you see a lot of my white counterparts, they'll ask the question, wait, so your hair is braided? Is it weaved? Tell me about this. And, you know, and I said, listen, ask these questions so you can get them, because I want you to be educated so you don't have these level of biases as you walk out of this meeting. I want you to be educated and feel comfortable about how you approach, you know, even, you know, in the work that we do, you know, our staff, they were, you know, boots on the ground, providing access to medical screenings. You know, we didn't have those hard conversations, but we had the conversation of, listen, we want you to be successful and we want you to change these behaviors. These are the things that we need you to do. These are the things that we want you to do so you could live longer and see your grandchildren, to see your husband, to see your children. So we're having those conversations with our neighbors in need. And so we, you know, just all in an effort to change their behaviors. But I just think that, you know, starting with, you know, meetings like tonight, this fireside chat, just making the conversation open about race and equity, and continuing the conversation is crucial.
Yeah. So we're going to open the questions, Kim, now, or where are we going to go? I mean, we're trying to handle world peace at this point.
Yes, we are. But yes, we need to go to questions because I could sit here all night and talk. And I feel blessed in that we have two fabulous speakers and guests with us this evening. And I think the conversation's not going to stop here. I think as an organization and as individuals, we'll continue the conversation in other ways so that we can better serve our community. And with no further ado, I will open it up to our attendees to see if anybody has any comments or questions to add to this. Oh, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. So for a question to either Jonathan or Jillian, we mentioned about food and health and everything else like that. Can you tell me if there's any initiative around addressing like what we would know as the food deserts, you know, where you talked about the healthy food markets and that there's only liquor stores and delis where you're buying candy, because the health really starts with the young child, as well as coupled with that, programs that are changing what's served in the schools for those marginalized school districts.
So I'll jump into that. So in my former position, I used to work at the Community Food Bank of New Jersey, overseeing the partner charities and was it 8 or 9 counties. And that was pretty much my job. I identified the food deserts to ensure that there was food pantries there. There are programs at the Community Food Bank of New Jersey that work with local bodegas to ensure that there are nutritious foods in the bodega, really providing those level of nudges. So I think that the work is being done. There's not a lot. When you start going into the underserved communities, you do see a lot of the liquor stores and the bodegas and the churches. But I think that they're moving, but not moving fast enough. Our cities.
I know. Yeah. Newark, ShopRite came to Newark.
Yep, that's the first ShopRite.
Huge. Because for years after the riots, there was no supermarket per se, as we know them in Newark. So where do you get your healthy foods from?
And prior to that, even think about it. When you go to Newark, I mean, you could count on your one hand how many farmers markets there are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus when you go into a different neighborhood or a different city or affluent city, there's numerous farmers markets. There's more access to produce.
Yep.
And just to add, I mean, I'm the name is slipping me, and I was thinking, I said exactly what you said, Michelle. There, in my role now, we've had the opportunity to work collaboratively with some other nonprofits that specifically address the food desert issue, and education around healthy eating and how you can, one organization in particular, and I can certainly get the name to Willa and get it to you, New York, specifically works with young people around, because the reality is you live where you live, right? So how do you go into a bodega and identify things that are healthy and can be, put into a dish that's a healthy, sustainable dish that isn't fast food or fried stuff or all that kind of stuff. And, so to that point, there's definitely concerted work, I know, in New York to do stuff like that, and organizations that are specifically dedicated to doing those things and working around the food desert issue.
Excellent. Caroline, I know you've got a couple questions.
Yeah, I have 2. I have one for Julie
You have
and
10?
one for Jonathan.
So Caroline is our president of Just for Success Northern New Jersey, for all those who are not aware of that.
And I like to talk a lot. I think the first one was, I was thinking about when you were talking about kind of, which is not a new fact, the lack of Black doctors, medical professions, mental health doctors. And it was interesting, as I was thinking of at the end of last year, I'm sure you saw there was a neurosurgeon from Nigeria who had started doing medical illustrations featuring Black, figures, babies, and it was a big thing that rolled out that all the medical journals only have images of white people, all the, everything that doctors are trained and worked off of. So Julian, with Summit Health, are they doing, I'm sure they're doing training. I'm sure there's lots of, but it does seem like an uphill battle if you spend all this time in school and all your discussions and all your colleagues are white and all the images you see are white. And, it just, I'm sure they're doing a lot to reflect on it, but have you seen a change, over the last year that you've been there with them around innovative ways to kind of tackle that?
I have. They actually, prior to me coming on board, they had their first senior vice president of DEI to really address the work. So that's the first step. We had a DEI mission and vision that was created. And then also at Summit Healthcare's, for us, it was really big for us to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our neighbors living in underserved communities that are bilingual. So one of the things that we did was we wanted to make sure that we translated the health education to Haitian Creole, making sure that it's Spanish, a Spanish handbook as well. And then while we're in the community, making sure that we have interpreters. I've doubled as a Haitian, speaking Haitian Creole when we can't find our interpreter. So I don't mind jumping in, but just making sure that we're meeting our neighbors, our people that need the services, but just meeting them exactly where they are and providing that level of access is crucial.
That's amazing. My other question was, I loved, and maybe I'm slow to the game. I loved the use, Jonathan, of the word brave spaces, because I've heard a lot about safe, and I think those are important. And we recently did this. We revamped a kind of a financial course that we offered our members. And this wonderful woman I met through, I think a panel I had done on nonprofit leadership, is certified in kind of financial literacy, but we flipped it on its head so that it was really became a brave space, because many of our members, debt or looming retirement or lack of state or whatever is in their sphere creates many anxieties and stress for them. And it was a brave space where we wanted people to be able to share where they are at, not be judged, and then really get in there and talk about, how to build it together in that brave space. Is there, and I feel we achieved it, Kim. I think we had a really open, good dialogue. Are there any tips that you can give us as an organization of like the key principles that you see in a good brave space?
So authenticity is always the place to start. And being willing to sort of ask the question, it's like the pulse question, right? What is happening? What am I seeing here in this dynamic? What is existing that isn't being brought out into the universe that is going to be here whether we talk about it or not? So it could be a racial dynamic. If you're a person of color and you're the only that walks into the room, I don't care what the circumstance is, that says something, right? If you're an organization, and again, we'll center it on race, that works in predominantly poor, marginalized communities of color, and most of the front-facing staff or direct service boots on the ground staff are people of color, but as you progressively move up to the top, board of directors, white, senior leadership, white, maybe some people of color sprinkled around the middle management or not. Those things are readily apparent to people of color, right? So I just say that to say that in thinking about what a brave space is, it's also being able to name and claim the authentic reality that people are, and to seriously interrogate reality. So there's always this work around how do we become a better organization, our mission, vision, and values. But are we looking at how equity plays out in the actual organization itself versus what we do with our clients? Like, where's that conversation? So interrogating reality is a piece of it. Again, and that's Susan Scott. I'm not gonna take credit for that. And practice.
I gotta get this book now.
Practice. It's almost like stretching leather. It's very difficult to have. I'll give you an example. I struggle with the word safety because I can tell you what's not safe, right? This notion of some white women who use their white privilege to brutalize people of color, the Karen syndrome. That's not safe. That's not safe, right? That's a literal physical threat to people of color. Being in a space where people authentically talk about race creates so many possibilities, again, but it's tremendous discomfort in it, right? So some of it is really qualifying what is safe and what isn't safe. Because I think if we start talking about not, how do we, is it safe to talk about race? You're going to shut the conversation down. So creating a brave space where we can struggle through our discomfort to become comfortable. And the only way you can do that is to practice it, right? To practice it. I think for a lot of people of color, and I'm going to just say this authentically, we intuitively know you can push the race conversation to a point, particularly when there's a lot of emotional reticence around, or resonance, I should say, around an issue. So post George Floyd, stuff like that, people are emotionally charged and they want to talk and they want to emote, and people of color and white people, right? But what happens 2 years after that? When the emotion is dissipated and it's business as usual. It's the the strategic plan. It's working on our mission. It's meeting requirements of our funders, compliance issues. How do you keep that energy up? You've got to have those conversations, because for people of color, we know that you can talk about this stuff until the leadership, until the people in power decide that it's enough. Now we need to get back to the real work. So how do you push through that and recognize that when that's happening? So some of it is practice and keeping your finger on the pulse when it's happening, and interrogating reality consistently, always.
Yeah. I love that, interrogating reality. Thank you.
Scott, not
Caroline,
me.
I have to give you props as our new president, because for our organization, this is the first time, I think, in our history that we've allocated a line item in the budget for DEI, which kind of puts teeth in what we're trying to do from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, from the point of training to getting to diversifying the board members, to supporting the women who face these issues day to day in the workplace. So I'm so proud of that, because you could talk the talk, but I feel like now we're at a place where we're walking the walk, and and that's because of your leadership.
We're at
Right.
the beginning of the walk. We got a
Yeah.
hill, but
Well, I'm gonna say, as one of the old dogs on one of the OGs of Dress for Success, that not only the money and putting your money where your mouth was an important piece, but even before there was money, you knew it was worth that we had to do something, and we had to start.
yeah.
And that I applaud the organization for moving forward in doing this kind of work, because it's important work, especially with the clients and the members and the women that we serve in Northern New Jersey, and the diversity within that. It's critical of what they're going through.
Good try.
That's it. And it was good trouble. And to Jonathan's point, it's having those brave space conversations with people. And it's important, and feel welcoming, and being willing to listen and learn from that, I think, is the most important part. And that's what Kim and Caroline, or were willing to do when I was going ballistic about it.
No, not you.
No, never. But it's
Can I add one more thing? Just one other thing. I think that as helping practitioners, and I'm going to say this, and I hope, it's going to be a little provocative, but I have to say it. For white helping practitioners, being a good person, we can have a nuanced conversation, and addressing issues of privilege doesn't take away from you being a good person. You can be a privileged person that is oblivious to your privilege and perpetuates the systemic issues, and still be a good person. I think that's the biggest barrier in human services and the helping professions to the work, is the notion that there is somehow an assault on me as a person, particularly if I devoted my life to helping and working with underprivileged and underserved people. If you say that I am perpetuating systemic racism, both can be true, and we can have a nuanced, thoughtful, critical discussion about how both can be true, but we've got to have the discussion, or we will never move forward in the work.
Jonathan, you're absolutely right, because that was me. And it hits home in a hard way, because my whole life has been about bringing people up, whatever they are. And it's been a journey. For me personally, it's been a journey, because I felt like, oh my God, all these years, you know, everything I thought I was doing right. I'm a bad person. I'm this, I'm that. So having those candid conversations and, you know, and thank God I had people around me that were willing to go on that journey with me because, yeah, it was painful. It was painful because I felt like I was a bad person, even though I spent my whole life trying to elevate people of all races and ethnicities. When I realized that I screwed up so bad and I didn't understand privilege, you know, and that I could still have privilege and still be okay, you know, and now I just want to be better. And I think us as an organization wants to be better. So I thank you guys so much for everything you've shared with us tonight. It's been candid, educational. I don't even know all the adjectives to describe it. I am so happy that you guys were able to join us tonight because I think all of us learned a whole lot. This will be posted on our YouTube channel so that those who were unable to attend are able to see it again. It's on Facebook Live. So I'm getting texts as we're speaking with people watching it live. So I can't thank you enough because I think this is the beginning of a lot more conversation and a lot more work that we can do collaboratively to empower more people. Willie, you want to add anything?
No, I think that was a perfect close. I'd like to offer one thing to Julia and Jonathan to please feel free to come to any one of our fireside chats during the year. Pop in and say hi. We're now connected forever on LinkedIn, so you know you can't get rid of me like that. So you're stuck with me for a while. But I really enjoyed your commentary. It was a pleasure meeting you both, and to hope to see you very soon live somewhere.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you for having
Likewise.
us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
Okay.
both so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.